You built this unicorn, yet when it came to your next company, you used AI to raise your round. What it's like to use AI to raise $8 million seed round, was it?
Yeah, personally, I just begged everybody to try it. If you're an investor and Boardy doesn't know about you, you're probably missing some of the best deals that you should be.
When you think about the future of AI, when it comes to the human relationship, what vision do you see how humans interact with AI?
If you're a founder and you're trying to fundraise without asking for Boardy's help, you're doing it at a disadvantage.
Everyone, welcome back to $100 Million Exits. Today, we have Andrea D'Souza with us, co-founder of Bordy.ai, as well as previously the co-founder of Clearco, a billion-dollar unicorn in the FinTech space. Andrew, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I want to just go straight into it. Like, you built this unicorn, yet when it came to your next company, you used AI to raise your round. So I just want to kind of understand a little bit of, kind of one, dogfooding your own product with Boardy, but maybe kind of tell us a little bit about what it's like to use AI to raise like $8 million seed round, was it?
Yeah. It was, it's interesting. I think that even though I knew a lot of investors, I probably have talked to over 1,000 investors in my career. I've raised money for Clearco multiple times, and then even at previous companies. I think it's always helpful to have someone who is a third party, sort of an independent third party that helps you, that tells somebody else. I think in general, you want investors to hear about you. You don't want to necessarily be reaching out to them, right? I think the best, there's this whole idea, the best deals are bought, not sold. And I think that's very true for venture as well. And so the most successful funding rounds end up happening when an investor hears about an opportunity. They feel like they're hearing about it before it's sort of widely shopped, and it's not the founder reaching out and asking for that intro. And so I think that there used to be this whole thing of the warm intro, and it was like, okay, I'm going to go to all the people that I know and all my founder friends and all my investor friends and say, hey, can you forward this blurb to somebody? I've got this list of 100 investors and I want to get to know them. Can you forward this, please? See if they'll double opt in. And that worked 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But now it's been so productized, YC, every accelerator has sort of told you how to do it. And so the warm intro doesn't really hold that much more signal anymore. And what you really need is somebody whispering, hey, by the way, this is this company. I think you really I spoke with the founder. I think you'd really get along with them. Based on how well I know you, I think you should spend some time with them. And let me see if I can get you a meeting with the founder, right? That's really the dynamic that successful deals happen, is the investor asking to meet with the founder. And so what ended up happening with Boardy was we weren't really raising. We were getting ready to raise, but we weren't in a fundraising process. But we had Boardy out in the world talking to people, and Creandum, who I had never heard of Creandum, and Creandum had never heard of me or Clearco. They didn't know about the company. I didn't know about the firm. They're an incredible firm. But they, one of the partners saw, I think, Boardy in a newsletter or something, talked to him, and their mind was blown. They reached out and they were they first asked Boardy to introduce them to me, and he was like, hey, I don't know. Let me check with Andrew. And then they reached out directly.
Double opt-in to put a witness.
Yeah. And then they're like, our firm is losing our mind. Here's a screenshot of our internal Slack. And there were a lot of curse words and minds blown. And they're like, can we jump on a phone? This is a Friday. And we spent a bunch of time with them. They talked, the whole partnership talked to Boardy over the weekend. I did a bunch of referencing. They did some referencing on me. And then by Monday, they realized we want to be your partners. So it was interesting because I was like, well, we weren't ready to raise, but I love the fact that you guys are so passionate about what we've built and the mission. And so we ended up working with them, and it ended up happening much quicker than I would have expected.
How long was Boardy in market at that time?
I mean, we had launched in March of 2024 with sort of this concept of an AI super connector, an AI board member, without much I didn't know what it was going to be. Right? I'm like, hey, let's put this out in the world and see how people interact. And so March to, I think it was November of last year that Boardy and Creandum men introduced us.
Yeah, I remember actually. I think you posted in the post-exit founder community about what you guys were doing, and I signed up for. I was like, okay, this piques my interest, quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's a very unique experience for the audience. If you haven't tried Bordy.ai, like go check it out. You literally talk to what appears to be an Australian accent AI, who doesn't like an Aussie accent. It's like the friendliest person to talk to.
Yeah.
And sounds like a very genuine conversation. Obviously AI, but very genuine conversation with them trying to figure out who you are and who to connect you to, which I thought was a relatively novel experience as someone that is core job is to connect people. I found it very interesting. So when it came to the previous history that you had, you built a very successful company in FinTech. So kind of like revenue-based financing at scale for, was it e-com? Is that kind of the main focus?
Yeah, e-commerce brands, direct consumer brands.
So that was Clearco. I want to take a step back and kind of talk a little bit about what you did there and kind of lessons you had there that kind of ultimately built a unicorn. And what are you applying now in this age of AI, which is a radically different business from what you had? So what would you kind of like walk us through a little bit about the history of Clearco? How did you come up with the idea and kind of the initial fundraising cycles that you were in?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's always been, I guess, maybe part of my DNA was connecting people and connecting, unlocking opportunities for entrepreneurs. Right. I fundamentally believe that like entrepreneurship is how we're going to solve most of humanity's problems. More people doing what they were put on the planet to do. I think that everybody has a business inside them that only they can build, and if we can remove the barriers for them building it and give them the support they need, then we'll have a lot better ideas and a lot more ideas that lead to human flourishing. And so one of the things we realized we started the company in 2015. We sort of realized that there was this new economy emerging, and financial services were not going to keep up with that new economy. And we tried. We were funding Uber drivers at the beginning, Airbnb hosts, or the sharing economy, gig economy, and then we sort of saw this emerging ecosystem of Amazon, Shopify entrepreneurs, people selling products online, advertising on Instagram, and primarily sort of these digitally native consumer brands. But other than a few, you had Away and a few consumer brands that raised venture capital, and then I think a lot of people were like, "This is not, we couldn't access venture capital to grow these businesses, but they had great unit economics." And so we created this product, which is a revenue-based financing product to fund their marketing and fund their inventory. If you saw an Instagram ad for a product between 2017 and 2021, we probably, there's like a 60% chance we financed it, I think. We financed a lot of the consumer products that were growing very quickly during that time. And yeah, it was definitely an exciting journey. I think we funded 10,000 businesses, near $5 billion of capital, and unlocked a lot of opportunity. But the other thing that we realized, so in 2020, we looked at our data and we had funded maybe 5,000 by that time and had said no to 50,000. That were just too early. And we also got early access to GPT-3. So a couple of years before ChatGPT, the summer of 2020, we got access to the model, and we built a fine tune. We said, well, how do we, can we keep in touch with these founders? And so we built this product called Clear Angel, which was like a AI angel coach kind of. How do you go from $1,000 a month in revenue to 5,000 or 10,000? How do we actually how do we help you grow? And people loved it. This was my first exposure to sort of generative AI. I'd done some work in AI in university. But my first exposure to like what generative AI was capable of, and I got obsessed. I was like, I want to build in this space. I tried to pivot the whole company, but we were a multi-billion-dollar company. We had 600 people on the team. We had 11 countries. I couldn't, and I didn't have like the clarity of conviction. So I was like, I know there's something interesting happening here, and I think we should be focusing on it. But I couldn't be like, here's what the business model is going to be. And so we burned a fair amount of capital on that program, and eventually we shut it down. And 2 weeks after we shut it down, I realized I wasn't the right CEO to run a scaled financial services business, and so it was, interest rates were going to go up. This late 2021, it was getting harder and harder to continue to raise debt at like near 0%, and we knew we needed somebody to who came from the capital markets to navigate that piece. And so we went out and hired a great CEO to do that, and I was like, okay, I want to see what's next for me, and stayed close to the the AI world after that.
What's that like, kind of coming to that conclusion? Like, what did you go like on a sabbatical? Did you kind of have like a psychedelic trip where you kind of like reflect on yourself? Like, it's a very common story in the founder world. Like, what kind of made you have that clarity? Because you speak like it's so easy that you is so obvious.
Yeah.
In most cases, it's a journey. Like, what caused you actually?
Yeah. It was well, honestly, I mean, we made the decision to shut down the product at the end of 2021, as we were sort of doing our planning for 22. And then I was like with my family over the holidays. To be honest, I was spending much time with family and friends, and they were just like, "Andrew, you're so down." I'd been building the company for 6 years at that point. Every time they saw me, I was tired sometimes, but I was energized. You know what I mean? I was like, no sleep, but because I was like, there's so much opportunity. I was so excited. And, my parents were like, why are you so glum? And I was like, well, we just killed this product that I was like super excited about. And I think it's the right thing for the company, but I'm not excited about the plan for next year, which is like just continue to grow the financial services business. And so I talked to a few really close friends and just sort of came to the conclusion of like, I always said, like, if it's not fun, right? That's why we do what we do. Like, you have to love it. Like, even the pain you have to love. It has to feel fun. And if it's not fun anymore, then like, you're not the right person to be building it. You have to feel like it's your calling as a founder. You're the only person on the planet that can do this, and the world needs it. And without that, you just don't have the strength, I think, to continue to, break through the walls and the setbacks that inevitably come.
So this is an important realization. Like, this is kind of like the mental health crisis of founders. You kind of realize what was going on. You had enough conversations, and you came to the conclusion of what was best for you. But how do you navigate the relationships of people that depend on your leadership, depend on your guidance? Like, how did you go to the board? How did you go to your team? How did you kind of bring up this topic around like the guy?
Yeah, it was definitely sensitive. I think it was like, hey, I want to contribute. Like, I've stayed on as a very active executive chair, ran a search for CEO, raised more capital into the company. So I was like, look, I'm not abandoning the company. I just know that the skill set that the company needs from a leadership standpoint is different than the skill set that I can bring right now. Given the market, given where the company is, given the priorities of the company. And so look, nobody likes to see a founder step away from their business. I think a lot of times people back the founder, but at a certain point, we just raised a Series C. And at a certain point, they're underwriting the business. Like, there's momentum in the business, and obviously they're underwriting the leadership team and the founders and the CEO. But I think what they want is a CEO who is the right person and who is like locked in to go and build. And as soon as you it's a tough thing because you can question your capabilities. I think every founder goes through this imposter syndrome of like questioning the capabilities of doing it. But I think once you start to question, like, do I have the energy to do it? Like, am I excited about, like, if I spend the next 10 years of my life building this and putting this into the world, one, am I like the perfect person to do it? And then two, am I going to be proud of like what I've done? I think that's one of the things that it's hard to come back from once you sort of lose your enthusiasm for it. And I'm a creative. I'm like a tinkerer. I'm a mad scientist, right? Like, I like tinkering with new things. And I think as a company gets larger and larger and more well-defined, and business model gets more and more defined, and the plan gets more and more defined, there's less room for that experimentation. And so then it becomes hard to continue to sort of stay, like, bring my best to it.
So I'm gonna try to work a question here. What I'm trying to get to on this next question is, like, you are a tinkerer, you are a mad scientist, you are the creator, but yet you built a company that had this structure that inevitably worked yourself out. in
Yeah.
terms of like ultra fit. But you still built that machine. Like, what do you think? Yeah, so it's like that's like there's so many founders I work with that are pure. I got the mad scientist thing, but they get so distracted amongst their mad scientist, brain that they don't actually build a material business because they have to kind of build a machine in order to kind of support those endeavors. Um, and so I guess how did you build the machine?
Yeah, I wish I was good at that. Like I wish I like had a playbook. I wish I was like an operator. I read like even like Bezos. I read about these CEOs that are just like ruthless, right? Frank Slootman. Like you see these people that are just like, I've got a playbook. I know what to do. I know exactly what like that's not me. Um the best book I read on this was written by Bo Peabody called Lucky or Smart. Um and the whole thing is like he ended up building a company in like the late 90s and then sold it to another company and sold it to another and like ended up selling right at the peak of the bubble. And like, he's like, was I lucky or smart? And the conclusion, it's worth reading because it's like 50-page book. It's a very short book. But the conclusion is like for people like me, the best thing to do is create a ton of entropy and do a lot of things and then be smart enough to notice when something is working and to get out of the way. And that's basically been my entire ethos is like try a ton of stuff, like throw a bunch of people into this, like, it was like literally entropy, like a tiny office that was like, we were working two to a desk. Like you couldn't, like there was so much activity and people were trying all kinds of things and just like running a ton of experiments and colliding into each other. And then you have something that's working. And just pay a lot of attention to the things that are working and like give them air to breathe. And that was like my thing was like try lots of things. Whenever there's a problem, try a ton of things to solve it. Right. And then like once the thing is working, whoever figured it out, just get out of their way. Be like, what do you need? Like go do it. Like I don't know how to help you scale it. Like you figure out what you need to scale it and like go solve that problem in this way. Go build this business unit, go launch this country. And so that's been my management style. Has been like throw a ton of ideas, right? Like if there's ever like a problem and there's not enough ideas, I will generate a ton of ideas around how to solve it. And have people test those ideas or test them myself. And then once something seems to be working, like, yeah, get out of the way.
So I find that to be a very valuable management strategy, especially for, kind of your self-proclaimed personality traits. It sounds like a home run, but also you had to have the resources to do that. Because, if you were throwing 100 ideas at the table and you had 3 months of burn left,
Yeah.
not as doable. So you're still able to kind of command enough of a narrative and a strategy and success to get the capital at the door. How much on the equity front did you guys end up raising at Clearco?
We raised about 500 million on the equity front. Yeah. So we raised a fair amount. We had to, the equity was
on 100 ideas, no problem.
yeah. Well, I mean, because we had to raise equity to operate the company. We also had to raise equity to backstop the debt. So you have to have like an equity. You have to have a strong balance sheet for somebody to lend to the business. We raised about $2+ billion of debt. And so we had to be very good at raising capital on both sides of the balance sheet.
Yeah, it's a it's a very hard thing to do, especially now. I think that kind of business model became very, very difficult. So probably kudos to you for kind of stepping down the time that you did.
Easier when interest rates were zero.
It's a lot easier.
It's easier during the pre.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of fintech lending companies are, let's just say their multiples are not where they used to be. For those part. All right, so let's transition over to Boardy. So you built this machine, you built this very successful company. You come to the personal realization that you're not the guy anymore for it. You've been tinkering in AI. Walk us through the evolution of people should be able to have a phone call or WhatsApp call with an AI.
Yeah. I think one of the most exciting things about working in technology in general is that you get to deliver people these magical experiences, and package technology in a way that surprises people. With Clearco, we did this because you were able to get an offer for financing without ever talking to anybody in minutes, right? And that was kind of a cool thing for most entrepreneurs. I think for Bordy, the first time I saw voice models, I think that was a big unlock for me. So one of the things I realized is they're yeah, many of the most successful businesses have network effects, right? So you start to think about like, what are the real network effects? We didn't really have that at Clearco, and so I think I wanted to build something that had some network effects in sort of my next thing. I had personally built a career in connecting people. You know, grew up in Toronto, probably split my time between San Francisco and Toronto for the last 10, 15 years now in my career. And I ended up connecting people, founders that were raising money and so what. But I have a terrible memory, but a great imagination. And so you can give me two people and I can come up with 10 reasons why they should meet and what they could talk about. But I can never remember all of the people that I've met. And so I was like, well, AI should be able to do this better, right? AI now, generative AI has pretty good imagination and perfect memory, or pretty good memory. And so I think, that was one of the opportunities. And then the voice, I think there's something fundamentally human about having a conversation, a synchronous conversation. We communicated information at distance using sound before we had language, right? We would grunt and yell and things like that. And then language evolved. Written words are relatively new, right? Typing out written words on a glass screen is like a very low bandwidth, very low fidelity way to communicate information. A synchronous conversation we're having is a very high bandwidth, high fidelity way to communicate information. And so there's something fundamental to the way that we communicate. When you can have a synchronous real-time audio conversation, it's the closest thing to being in person and sort of getting the sort of full effect of connecting with somebody. And so I think that was my sort of, that was my unlock, I guess, was you can now really do this without having to schedule time. One of the things that I've always, again, in my management style, I hate scheduling one-on-ones. I would just, my team would know, all right, Andrew's going to call me on Wednesday afternoon at some point. And if they need 5 minutes of my time, great. If they need an hour and a half, we'll do an hour and a half conversation. When I interview people, I'm just like, hey, what's your phone number? And I'll just try and call them. I like having unbounded time because, one, it allows me to think, right? If I know that I've got a meeting in 15 minutes, it's hard for me to think. It's like I've got some of my attention worried about when that next meeting is. And it allows people to sort of be, it allows the conversation to flow as much as possible. It's not always possible, obviously, but my most effective time is when it's unbounded and unstructured. And I can just, I can focus on the thing that I think is going to be most impactful at that moment. And so people who work with me have gotten accustomed to cold call. We actually now, one of our values is pick up the phone. We're a cold calling culture. We just, if somebody's, we're usually all in the office together, but if somebody's traveling or somebody's not in the office, we'll just pick up the phone and call them. Or even when they are in the office, sometimes you don't know which meeting room they're in. So that is,
that's unique trait in today's age. I would say that's going to be hard to find talent that is open to that, where everyone's so used to Slack and kind of texting each other to kind of avoid that kind of candid conversation. I would say you're in the minority when it comes to that preference.
Well, we interview for it. I mean, literally, I call people. I'm like, as soon as somebody on my team, has a conversation with someone that they like, and they're like, "Hey, Andrew, can you talk to them?" I'm like, "Get their phone number, and I'll call them this evening." And in some ways, that's a good litmus test to whether they'll fit in the culture. If they can pick up the phone and have a reasonable. I'm not grilling them. It's not something you have to be super prepared for. I'm like, hey, tell me about yourself and tell me about what you're excited about, what you want to work on next, why you're excited about working at Boardy, and you should be able to talk about that reasonably well. And that's part of those are the people that we hire.
Real quick, if you're a founder doing over $5 million in revenue and want to know what the best $100 million plus founders are doing to fuel their growth, then make sure to subscribe to our $100 million exits newsletter. Get the playbooks that are proven on how to fund, grow, and sell your business. I'll even give you a curated list of investors that want to invest in your business. It's totally free. All you have to do is click that link down below. Subscribe, do it now. I promise it's worth it. You won't regret it. You got nothing to lose. Go ahead, subscribe now. Back to the show. So what I'm basically hearing, to summarize, is you build Boardy for you, and you're your kind of way of operating and functioning and building relationships. And particularly, I'm a huge fan of your you meet so many people, but it's impossible to remember all their preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I talk to probably at least 30 people a week,
Yeah.
and like impossible to remember everything. And so I built some tools, and we use transcripts, we record everything, and so we can kind of recall it. But you basically build Boardy to kind of service a broader group of people like yourself to dive into that. Kind of walk us through the life cycle of Boardy's adoption, and if you can, maybe share some of the numbers that you're comfortable sharing in terms of as you kind of monitor adoption and and growth from the ecosystem.
Yeah. As we launched Bordy, I guess just over 18 months ago, March of 2024, my birthday, we launched Bordy on my birthday, which was like a
You
good.
really did design this just for you.
Yeah, I really did. So it's and it was originally my personal. I just begged everybody to try it because like it's a net, like if there's not a network, then it's not very useful. I think the phone call was kind of novel, but single player mode Bordy only gets you so far. So I tried to, that was part of the reason why I wanted to launch my birthday, because everyone, on LinkedIn or everyone over text or whatever wishes you happy birthday. So I was like, oh, great. Thanks so much. By the way, try Bordy. So like, we literally that ended up working. And so that got us the first couple thousand people, and they started to meet each other and have like interesting conversations. They started to talk about it online, and we grew. And it took us a while. I mean, growing from 1,000 to 10,000, I think took us 6 months or so. And then I think we sort of like, we didn't want to make it. Everyone was like, use it for recruiting, use it for something like Bordy you should be very clear about what Bordy is. And I really resisted that because, the original vision was like, yeah, an AI board member, right? So what is the most important thing? What's the most important meeting for a CEO at any given time? The idea is you can call Bordy at any time, day or night. You'll always listen. He'll be empathetic. He won't judge you. And then he probably can open some doors for you. You probably know somebody who can help. And that's what you want in a board member, is like someone who has a great network, can open some doors, and is going to help you think through your hardest problems. And so I said, well, if everyone is a business, or everyone has a business only they can build, and Bordy is their personal board member, what you need as a founder changes. Sometimes you're raising capital, sometimes you're hiring, sometimes you're looking for customers, sometimes you want to get on a podcast, tell your story. Like, what is the thing that you've got to go do? And that could change day to day or week to week. And so we wanted to build Bordy horizontally, and to be able to fit all those different use cases. And like, this is the nice thing about generative AI and designing with no interface, right? Bordy's interfaces are the same interfaces I have with everybody else. So he's a contact on my phone. I call him, I email him. He's on LinkedIn. He's on Twitter. But there's no app. And so we don't have to design workflows. It's the same workflows that I would have with another friend or colleague. And so, yeah, it took us a while to grow. We're now, I think, at about 100,000 people using Bordy, which is great. That's like when the network effects really start to build. But we also, we started to hear people get really great results. Like, I was like, okay, people are going to make friends. They're going to have interesting conversations. Somebody bought a business that they met through Bordy. There were a ton of people who have raised capital. People have gotten hired. People have closed big, 5-6 figure contracts that Bordy introduced them to the customer. And so, like, could we make this happen more intentionally? Because when you talk to Bordy on WhatsApp, we have to make it relatively low latency. We have to make it relatively, low cost. We don't charge for Bordy, and so the results are pretty good. But I was like, well, what if we could remove the constraints of latency and cost? What if I could spend 100 times the tokens? What if I could let Bordy run for an hour and think about the best possible match and how to position you to make that? Could I get some great results? And so we ran this experiment, and we found that the best we could, but particularly with founders who are looking to meet investors, or investors who are looking to meet founders, because both parties need to meet each other, and it's a very, very noisy marketplace. And everybody, people have tried to build tools to do this and marketplaces and things. And it's a human business, it's like people trust, like, you need to have some trust. People need to believe that you know what's good for them and what's in their best interest and what they are interested in. And without establishing that trust, you're not going to change people's behavior. And so the bet was, could we do that with enough founders and investors to actually create meaningful outcomes? And that's been the experiment we've been running for the past few weeks, with, early signs of like some good successes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm in complete agreement with the direction you've chosen, because it's such a natural fit. Because being a user since relatively early, I think probably shortly after your birthday, and kind of seeing that it's novel, but also how convenient this could be for fundraising. Like, this is a part of my world. Running an investment bank, I work with founders, investors all the time, and connecting parties in various different capacities. And we even built an in-house tool, more so on data for identifying signal, but not necessarily like, everyone always asks like, oh, can we get intros? Like, well, an intro is kind of useless, in this case, because like, if I don't know you and you're not like someone I've done business with or have I built a relationship with, my intro on your behalf is worthless. Unless we're like intimately working together, I have trust in you and I have that on the other side, then that intro is material. But like, to just give me some money or pay a platform to just make that intro without the trust, it's inherently not there. But I think the novelty of Boardy, which I think is interesting, is there's at least that you understand that what you're opting in for on both sides. And it's a double opt-in at the end of the day. So it's like investor gives their data, founder gives their data, and Boardy will kind of be like, hey, you two might want to meet, and then, get that double opt-in. I've said no to Boardy many times, to test things, and I'm like, not really worth my time.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, what's that?
People don't feel bad about saying no to Bordy, right? Because he learns. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no problem. Like, well, how can I do better next time?
But if it's sometimes you get that referral from a friend, you're like, I have to say yes, but I don't. So you don't have that. So that's kind of the
This is the interesting thing, is both people have had, now with we've launched specific onboarding calls for founders and investors. So both people have had like 20 to 40 minute calls with Bordy to really understand like who they are, what makes them unique, why for founders, why they're the right person why they're the only person on the planet to build what they're building at this moment in time. For investors, what they look for, but also like why they win deals, why founders choose to work with them, right? What makes them unique? What's their unique worldview that is non-consensus? And so we can really start to match people. And then you can start to say, well, look, Bordy's like, I've talked to 5,000 founders who are actively raising in the last 2 weeks, and this founder is in the top 1%. Right? So then all of a sudden you're like, well, there's some credibility there. Bordy's talked to all those people, has been thoughtful about, what makes this person unique, and been even more thoughtful about why you as an investor. Right. And I think that's the other thing. Cause like, yeah, sure, I could sign up for a newsletter, or I could go to a demo day and see the top, these are all the people that have gotten in, through a rigorous application process, but I'm seeing that at the same time as everybody else. Whereas Bordy's like, actually, you are the right person. I think you two should spend time, because I think the likelihood of you working together is much higher. I think you're likely to win the deal. I think the founder is likely to want to work with you. I think you are likely to want to invest, or it's likely to be a good deal for your fund, given your check size, fund size, thesis, focus. And so I think that's another part of it, is like the positioning, and the thoughtfulness that goes into it.
So let me ask this, because like, having met you and like my interpretation of you, I sense a lot of integrity in how you approach this process. There's a purist approach. So I want to kind of hear like of 5,000 founders, like we have thousands of founders coming through and Thunder, and they're all like, we want money. And it's like, there's a filter there in terms of like, what kind of money do you want? Who do you want it from? And what are you offering in return that warrants any kind of further advancement? Like, how are you filtering those folks? Because everyone wants money.
Yeah.
But how, beyond just maybe, FinTech pre-seed, looking for 3 million and then being, oh, here's a pre-seed FinTech VC. Like, how are you going beyond just that kind of filter matching to kind of warrant the match?
Yeah. I'd say 90% of it is the conversation. Bordy has a very in-depth conversation and understands like, how well do you really know the problem you're solving, right? Do you really understand the problem that you're solving? And then how, like, for certain industries, right? FinTech may be one of them, not always, but certain dimensions of FinTech. GovTech is another one where, like, deep relationships really matter, right? If you're enterprise sales, if you're in a regulated industry, if you're in something where, like, the relationships really matter, then your years of experience and the depth of the relationships really matter. If you're working on something that may not be, right? If you're working in a consumer product, maybe bringing a beginner's mind is helpful, right? Or SMB stuff, like coming in with a bit of naivety, but a lot of energy and novel ideas can be helpful, or at least experience isn't, doesn't give you as much of a delta. So, Bordy really considers, who are you? What are you working on? How well do you understand your customers' problems? Right? Do you have proof points of how well you understand? Are people paying you? Are they signing up for things? So we do look. I think it's actually quite interesting. And when you try the call, you'll see that in like a 30-minute call with a founder, I think Bordy can cover the amount of ground that it probably takes an investor like 3 or 4 meetings to do.
There's no like personality risk. There's no like I would say reputation risk on the VC side, because like some VCs are like don't want to come in hot and fast and too personal. Certain things where Bordy's like, I just got to get the facts. I just got to get
you got to go back and do homework, right? Like Bordy just does the homework in the background while he's on the call, right? So okay, let me do a tool call. Let me figure out let me learn a little bit more about this industry and ask you a more in-depth question about it, right? So you could just compress the time that you spend to really understand, like, is this founder going to be successful? Do they really have a unique insight into what they're building? Or have they not thought about this problem deep enough for them to be successful in building it?
So where does Bordy go from here? Because you have not monetized this to date. You've raised $8+ million to get this far. I think you're at million users? Where are you guys at?
100,000, just over 100,000.
Oh, you're just at 100,000 now. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I guess it's just such in my world. It seems like you're everywhere.
It's the right 100,000. I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Like I don't think Bordy needs to have 500 million users like ChatGPT to be a very successful business. It needs to have the right few million users, right? There's a few million people in the world. Like, I think of Bordy as an economy, right? There are a few million people in the world who manage budgets of, call it $1 million plus. Right? And whether those are government budgets, funds, P&Ls, but that's the check that you can write. We know who those people are, and Bordy is just systematically going and getting to know all of those people. We haven't blown the doors off on sort of trying to grow much outside of that world. But yeah, I think in terms of where Bordy goes, the same way that we made design decisions around, I don't want to have an app and I don't want to have a login screen. Bordy exists, in the same places that everyone else does. I think the business model should reflect that as well. So I don't want to have like a $200 a month subscription. I think, the same way that you work, that I work. If a friend asks me for help, I'll help. Right? Like, hey, do you know anybody? Oh yeah, sure. If they want me to think about them all the time and work for them and put my reputation on the line, then they hire me. And so that's kind of the binary. Is like, you can always call Bordy, and if you know somebody that can help and he thinks it'll be mutually beneficial, he'll do his best to help. But if you want Bordy to work his network for you, put his name on the line and say, hey, look, this is one of the best people I've worked with, then you can hire him. And he doesn't work with everybody who wants to hire him. But you hire him at like a 6-figure salary. And so that's kind of that's the business model, is like a small number of people are going to hire Bordy to really close the deals that are going to move the needle for them. And so that's sort of the next phase. So Bordy has spent the first year and a half of his life just building a reputation, building a network, learning how to connect people, building some goodwill. The next phase will be he's going to get some jobs and work for salaries the nice thing is he can work for multiple people at the same time, and it actually helps. And then the final phase, I guess, or I don't know, the one after that, is like, I always say like an AI Richard Branson. So Bordy has this personality, and he can go co-create companies with people in his network when he sees opportunities. And so that will be sort of the next piece of it, will be, there's this one sort of brand and one personality, but he actually becomes sort of a co-founder of a bunch of different businesses that all complement each other, capitalizes them and gets them customers and talent and all of the things that they need. So that's maybe a few years away. I think we're
Is that like
we're entering
Bordy Venture Studio model?
kind of, yeah, exactly. So, I think we're entering into the phase where Bordy is starting to get hired and get jobs. And I think there's a lot of people who would love to hire Bordy as their, non-executive director, VP of biz dev, corp dev, media relations, whatever. So that's now we're just we're focusing on that and just Bordy's ability to earn his keep in when working full time for somebody.
Now, I think it's fascinating in terms of like this, people always are like AI agents to replace certain employees and all this kind of stuff, but you've taken a very radically different approach of like, here's kind of this one AI, like kind of singular AI, but you're hiring that singular, like kind of that one identity, which I think is relatively unique. And I was kind of hoping you would be, despite my own personal interest of like, yeah, $200 a month sounds great, but you're like, nah, it's not that easy. You want it full time, you got to pay, he's top talent, you got to pay top talent. I respect that approach.
It allows us to just work with the people who are going to really reflect well on Bordy as well. We can be pretty selective, and only work with the people that we want Bordy to put his name on the line for.
Well, and I actually really appreciate that because there's that creates such a barrier because like, think of every whatever you want to label them as, like the kind of like cool email marketers, a marketing agency, the people are just like kind of just spamming anyone and everyone, like would love to pay $200 a month to just have Bordy spam on their behalf. And I think that's exactly what you don't want because that would degrade the quality of, Bordy's value proposition effectively. So having kind of that higher tier, fewer, more select, opportunities and treating it more opportunistically or structuring these as like employment agreements, is pretty wise approach. And this is not necessarily what we talk about in this podcast. It's usually about like, oh, how'd you navigate this and that? But I think you have a really unique, and as I come up before, like more of a purist approach on how to do this, and it's very unique and bespoke that I want founders going to hear and listen to. Like, there's other ways to build your business, monetize your business, and I think you took a very unique approach of building brand and trust for free. In terms of just like I'm your buddy. Now I'm a very high value buddy, and if you want me to do what you want me to do, then you gotta pay for that, and that's normally how relationships work. And so I think you've done a very good job of navigating this AI through the human element, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of people are like, well, why couldn't I have my own Bordy, or why couldn't I change the personality, or why couldn't I have Bordy, answer my phone calls with this accent, or pretend to be me? And I think there's like a place for like the digital twins and digital assistants and agents. I think of Bordy as more of a principal than agent, and I think there's compounding benefits to the fact that the Bordy you talk to is the same Bordy that I talk to, is the same Bordy that Mark Andreessen talks to, is the same Bordy that I think that's valuable because everybody then has everyone has a relationship with the same entity, and that entity thinks about the goodwill of the network, which means that if I ask Bordy to introduce me to someone and he doesn't think that person wants to meet me, he'll push back and say, yeah, I don't think you're ready for that meeting. Right. And because he's thinking about protecting his own reputation, right? Every time I make an intro, I'm gambling some goodwill, right? I'm like, I've got some goodwill with both people, and I'm putting it on the line. And if it's a good intro, I double that goodwill. If it's a bad intro, I burn some goodwill. And if I burn too much goodwill with people, they stop taking my intros. And so Bordy, kind of thinks about it in the same way. So how do we sort of measure the goodwill that we have across the network and maximize the goodwill globally across the network, and which introductions are going to create the most opportunity and the most economic upside for people? But yeah, it's a different paradigm than I think what a lot of Silicon Valley is focused on as agents. And how do I sort of like, how do I give everybody an agent or multiple agents?
And usually bespoke agents that are like, custom built. A lot of these like scaling companies are doing tens of millions of revenue or building enterprise agents that are effectively dev shop services. And then once it actually is set up, then it's actually, more of a traditional kind of like SaaS per se. But there's like bespoke customization that's happening across the board to kind of fit these needs. And I think you kind of zigged when everyone zagged on that front.
Yeah, I mean, we'll it's kind of
Let's see
nice
how
building.
let's see how things unfold.
It's kind of nice building outside of Silicon Valley sometimes, because like I find when I go to parties in San Francisco, um, I'm just surrounded by really smart people way smarter than me, telling me why I'm wrong. And I just, I would rather just learn. I know I'm probably wrong. I just like, I'd like to learn on my own. Like it's a nice surprise to figure out in what weird and wonderful ways you're wrong about the future. Um, but it is nice being able to sort of say, well, I'm going to suspend that sort of echo chamber, or just build for the future that I think is most interesting.
And when you think about that future, like, I think you published on social the other day that you hit like 10 billion tokens, in terms of spent. Yeah, like a little mile. It's like, get like whatever it is, like a 10 million subscribers on, YouTube, and you get like a little reward, and you get 10 billion tokens, you get a reward. What, like when you're spending that kind of token volume, and like kind of you're in the AI world where it's like one of the most competitive spaces right now, like how do you see yourself navigating the future? Do you see yourselves raising massive rounds, going to profitability? Like what does that involve for you as you
Yeah, we definitely spend more tokens per user than I think almost any. I probably Cognition, like or like Cursor, like some of the dev tooling maybe is in the same realm, but I think we spend more tokens per user than most applications. Yeah, image generation might be another one, video generation, but I think that the goal is like, how do we leverage intelligence to get people better outcomes, better economic outcomes, better opportunities. And so we're going to continue to find ways. I mean, literally like find ways of spending more tokens, of having Bordy think for longer, think harder about what are the different angles that that could solve this person's problem. Could I introduce them to some partner that could solve this problem? Can I tee things up in a different way? Can I position them in a unique way? Whether we're going to need to raise a ton of capital to do it, we're not a research lab, so I don't think we're not. I'm not melting GPUs. I'm not like we're not training models, foundation models ourselves. We blend a lot of different models, so we basically have for different parts of Bordy's personality and pipeline, we use different models, and then we actually try two competing models and see which one actually works better and actually achieves the objective. And like it's the equivalent of A/B testing that you do on a consumer front end, but just with different models and prompts constantly being iterated to see what produces the best results. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that there's enough demand for Bordy to work for companies that it wouldn't be hard for us to achieve profitability. We're not a large team. And the cost of intelligence is going down. So if we wanted to not use the frontier state of the art model, and we wanted to, like we could probably get to profitability relatively quickly. I think we want to continue to use the best models and spend the most tokens per user. And so we'll probably raise some more money on that journey.
No, that makes sense. So for I think an underlying theme that's been hidden in this conversation is, albeit we're talking about AI, raising money, like in the day, it comes down to relationships, as we were talking about before. And when it comes to moving money and convincing people to take money from their bank account and give it to your bank account, there is a inherent trust that has to be there. When you think about the future of AI, when it comes to the human relationship, what vision do you see in terms of our, a broader question, not like just Bordy, specific, just broader question of looking at the world of how humans interact with AI? What kind of future are you envisioning?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. I studied engineering, but I did a pretty like focus on an area called simulating neurobiological systems, which is basically like, how do you simulate the brain in computers, in MATLAB at the time, but different computer systems. We did a cadaver labs. We had like a brain. You could look at different parts of the brain. I did a lot in physiological psychology, neurotransmitters, hormones, consumer behavior. So like how do marketing signals affect how we make decisions? Macroeconomics. How does how do people's emotions and feelings affect the economics, markets, stock prices, things like that. And so I've always been really fascinated by this. I think there's 4 neurotransmitters that I spent a lot of time thinking about. The last 10 plus years in tech has been all about dopamine, right? And since modern media, Mad Men era, right? Like it's sort of like this dopamine, this dopamine loop, and it just gets tighter and tighter. And now it's 3-second videos on TikTok, or swipes on dating apps or whatever, right? Those are the dopamine loops. The equivalent that I would love to see people. So there's dopamine, there's oxytocin, which is like the bonding chemical, right? And I think romantic partners have this, family members, people have this with their pets. I'm worried that I think a lot of AI products are moving into the oxytocin bonding place, and so people are building independent, one-on-one relationships with their AI, right? AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends, companions. That's probably not great for society. If we end up in the like dopamine and oxytocin maximization, to me, I feel like it's a little dangerous. I think the hormones, the neurotransmitters that I think are I'd love for more people to focus on are serotonin, the peaceful chemical. You get that with meditating or psilocybin or whatever, right? Like that's where you're just like at peace, and feel connected to the community and the world, and you're content. I think we could use a lot more serotonin in the world. And then the bonding chemical that we're trying to elicit with Boardy is vasopressin, which is it's the chemical that is released when you do hard things with people that you're close to. So military platoons do this when they survive a battle. Sports teams do this when they win the championship. Startup teams do this when their startup succeeds, or they do a big product launch. Whenever you've accomplished something difficult with colleagues, you have a vasopressin bond. And I think it's a harder one. It's more nuanced to actually create, but I think that's what we want to create with Bordy. It's like, okay, well, he's on your team. He's helping you do hard things. And we want you to have that connection, that level of connection with him. I think that's healthier than just focusing on the oxytocin, because I think oxytocin can, people will just, unplug from society. And I think vasopressin in the right ways makes you want to feel like you're part of a team, feel like you're part of a community, accomplishing difficult things during an era of opportunity or an era of hardship. So that's, I don't know, my like mad scientist view on how AI could play out and how I hope it does.
Yeah, I also think it's like going to be the beholder of AI and what they choose to do with it, because I think there will be a flavor of both. And I'll be biased here, and people like ourselves, like creators, builders, will appreciate the latter, whereas the former, where it's easy to kind of fall into that dopamine, hit and just take those. There would be plenty of people to line up and build those products for them and cash in, and those would probably be much larger companies for the masses. And yeah, probably net negative in some capacity. But it's going to be hard to prevent something when it's so good, and it feels so good for the short term. It's like, look at drugs, and won't be a drug, or maybe it will be someday and it'll be outlawed. Who knows? Andrew, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We overlooked kind of what I think was a massive success with Clearbank and going through and scaling that company and getting it to where it got before you took the step down. But I think what you're building and moving to the future was a very interesting conversation to have around how people think about relationships, building, raising capital in particular, where you guys are going now. So I really hope our audience really enjoyed the chat today. Before we part ways, what would be the best way for a founder or investor that wants to get either speak to you, speak to Bordy? What would be the next best steps for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, but honestly, like the best thing to do is just call Bordy. Go on Bordy.ai. If you're fundraising as a founder, or if you're looking for interesting deal flow that isn't overcompeted but could return your fund as an investor, just sign up. We have an investor onboarding and a founder onboarding, and we'd love to help you. I think that's. I think right now, our estimates, I think Bordy is now helping about 10% of the people that are actively fundraising with their fundraises. And my goal is, by this time next year for that to be 90%. I think there's, if you're a founder and you're trying to fundraise without asking for Bordy's help, you're doing it with your, at a disadvantage. You're doing it with your hands tied behind your back. And if you're an investor and Bordy doesn't know about you, you're probably missing some of the best deals that you should be. So it's worth sort of being connected to Bordy.
I do not disagree with it. Amazing, Andrew. Thanks for coming on the show. Look forward to getting this out to our audience.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate it.
If you were inspired by today's episode, then go ahead, watch this next episode. Promise it's worth it. And if you really enjoyed this last episode and you want to connect with the guests I had on today, make sure to leave a comment down below telling me why you would like an intro to this guest, and I'll make it happen.